The air in the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas crackled with an almost religious fervor. 20,000 souls were packed to the rafters for Glam, the 25th anniversary spectacular of World Championship Wrestling, and their collective breath was a single, held entity. In the center of the ring, bathed in a halo of punishing white light, stood the two pillars of the women's division. They were more than just wrestlers. They were ideologies clashing. On one side stood the champion, Ayesha Raymond. Billed from the darkest pits of London, she was known as the Amazon, a title she earned not through marketing, but through sheer, unadulterated destruction. At 6 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed to blot out the lights and a gaze that promised nothing but oblivion, she held the WCW Women's Championship. It wasn't just a belt to her. It was a crown of conquest, polished with the tears of every opponent she had systematically dismantled during her brutal 434-day reign. She was the immovable object, a god-queen of her own violent pantheon. On the other side stood Tessa Blanchard, wrestling royalty, the third-generation star with a pedigree etched into the very fabric of the industry. The Diamond, they called her, forged under the immense pressure of a legendary family name, beautiful but impossibly hard. She wasn't as tall as Ayesha, but she carried an intensity that could shrink giants. Every fiber of her being screamed defiance. She had clawed her way through the entire roster, survived a War Games match, and won the right to be here. She was the irresistible force, a tempest of technique and heart hell-bent on reaching the summit. The bell hadn't rung yet, but the war had already begun. It was waged in the silence between them, in the way Ayesha's lips curled into a smirk of utter contempt, and in the way Tessa's jaw was set like stone, her eyes burning holes into the champion. This wasn't just a match for a title. It was a battle for the very soul of the division. Ayesha's era of tyrannical power versus Tessa's promise of a new dawn built on legacy and skill. And somewhere, hidden beneath the spectacle and the fury, a shocking secret was waiting to detonate, ready to change everything they thought they were fighting for. The build-up, a reign of fear. Ayesha Raymond's championship reign was a masterpiece of psychological and physical warfare. She didn't just beat her opponents, she broke them. She would target a specific weakness, a previously injured knee, a questionable cardio, a moment of self-doubt, and exploit it with the precision of a surgeon and the cruelty of a predator. Her matches weren't athletic contests. They were public dissections. Veterans were retired. Cocky rookies were humbled, and a palpable fear had settled over the women's locker room. No one could solve the puzzle of the Amazon. Her power was absolute, her defense impenetrable. Tessa Blanchard watched this reign of terror from the sidelines, first with professional disdain, then with a growing personal fury. She saw greatness in Ayesha's strength, but was disgusted by her methods. While Ayesha represented power obtained through fear, Tessa believed in power earned through respect and undeniable talent. Her journey to Glam was arduous. She outlasted 5 other women in a grueling elimination chamber, pinning the former champion to finally secure her shot. The press conferences leading up to WC25 were electric. "Tessa Blanchard," Ayesha had sneered, leaning into the microphone, her voice a low rumble. "You come here with your famous last name and your pretty moves. You talk about legacy. Let me tell you about legacy. A legacy is a story told about the dead, and at Glam, I will make sure your story ends. You are not a diamond. You are just a piece of glass, and I am going to shatter you." Tessa's response was cold and direct. "You talk a big game, Ayesha, because you've only ever faced opponents you could scare before the bell even rang. But I'm not scared of you. I've been in the ring since I could walk. This business is in my blood. That title you hold so dear, it's just on loan. I'm coming to collect. You call yourself an Amazon? A queen? Well, queens can be overthrown. I am not just a challenger. I am the revolution." The world was divided. The purists and wrestling historians backed Tessa, seeing in her the culmination of decades of wrestling evolution. The lovers of chaos and raw power fell at the feet of Ayesha, mesmerized by her dominance. The stage was set for a generational conflict. The match, an epic of violence and will. The bell finally rang, and the sound was like a gunshot marking the start of a war. The first 5 minutes were a brutal education for Tessa Blanchard. She charged in with a flurry of strikes, but it was like punching a granite wall. Ayesha absorbed the blows with a dismissive grin before grabbing Tessa by the throat with one hand and launching her clear across the ring. The sound of Tessa's body hitting the turnbuckle echoed through the arena. Ayesha was methodical. She worked over Tessa's back, hoisting her up for a devastating, gut-wrenching backbreaker. She followed it with a series of power slams, each one seemingly shaking the ring itself. The crowd, once firmly behind Tessa, began to feel a familiar dread. They had seen this story before. Ayesha was too big, too strong. The Amazon was simply on another level. The champion dragged Tessa to the center of the ring, preparing for her finisher, the Amazon Slam, a vicious spinning powerbomb that had ended dozens of careers. But Tessa was a Blanchard. As Ayesha lifted her, Tessa began to fight, raining down elbow strikes to the side of Ayesha's head. It was pure instinct, pure survival. She wriggled free, landing on her feet with the grace of a cat. Ayesha charged, but Tessa ducked under the clothesline and hit a rapid-fire sequence of kicks to Ayesha's leg, the same leg that had a heavily taped knee brace under her gear. It was the first sign of a strategy. You can't chop down a tree from the top. You have to attack the roots. The match shifted. It was no longer a display of Ayesha's power, but a chess match of speed versus strength. Tessa was a hornet, stinging and moving, avoiding the champion's grasp. She hit a tilt-a-whirl DDT that sent a shockwave of hope through the audience. She climbed to the top rope, but Ayesha was up in a flash, grabbing her by the hair. They fought on the top turnbuckle, a perilous battle 10 feet in the air. Ayesha went for a superplex, but Tessa blocked it, delivering a series of headbutts that stunned the champion. With a guttural roar, Tessa hooked Ayesha and executed a sunset flip powerbomb from the top rope. The entire arena erupted. 1, 2! Ayesha kicked out with explosive force, throwing Tessa off her. The war waged on. For 20 minutes, they threw everything they had at each other. Ayesha caught Tessa mid-air during a crossbody and transitioned it into a fall-away slam that sent Tessa crashing to the outside. Tessa recovered and drove Ayesha's knee repeatedly into the steel steps. Back in the ring, the exhaustion was visible on both women. Their chests were bruised red from chops, their faces masks of sweat and determination. Tessa finally saw her opening. She hit a cutter out of nowhere, scrambled to the top rope, and flew through the Las Vegas air, connecting perfectly with her finisher, the top rope twisting splash she called the Magnum. "This is it!" the commentator screamed. The referee's hand slapped the mat. 1, 2, tar, no! At the very last millisecond, Ayesha Raymond's shoulder lifted off the canvas. The collective gasp of 20,000 people was sucked out of the building, replaced by a roar of disbelief. No one had ever kicked out of the Magnum after such a grueling match. Tessa stared down, her face a mixture of shock and frustration. She didn't know what else she could do. She had given it her all. She looked at Ayesha, who was slowly, painfully, pushing herself up from the mat, a grim smile on her face. It wasn't a smile of arrogance anymore. It was a smile of respect. The shocking twist, the unveiling. Tessa went to grab Ayesha to pull her up for another onslaught, but Ayesha held up a hand, signaling her to stop. The referee looked confused. Ayesha, on her knees, breathing heavily, shook her head. Then she did something no one ever expected. She crawled to the ropes and pulled herself up, her movements stiff and agonizing. She waved away the referee and called for a microphone. The crowd fell into a confused silence. Was she going to forfeit? Was she injured? Ayesha stood in the center of the ring, her powerful frame trembling slightly, not from the blows, but from something deeper. The championship belt lay forgotten near the ropes. She looked at Tessa, and for the first time in her entire reign, the mask of the Amazon was gone. In its place was just a woman, tired and broken. "Tessa!" Ayesha's voice was raspy, stripped of its usual booming authority. "For 434 days, I have stood on top of this mountain. I have beaten everyone. I have destroyed everyone. I made you all fear me." She took a deep, shuddering breath. "And it was all a lie." A murmur of confusion rippled through the arena. Tessa stood frozen, her mind racing. 2 years ago, Ayesha continued, her voice cracking with emotion, my doctors told me my career was over, a degenerative spinal condition. One bad bump, they said, and I could be paralyzed. They told me to retire. But I couldn't. Not like that. Not as a tragedy. I had one more run in me. One more story to write. She pointed a trembling finger at Tessa. I watched you. I watched you from the moment you debuted. I saw the fire, the legacy, the raw, untamed talent. You were undeniable. But you were just potential. You were a diamond in the rough. The pieces started clicking into place in the minds of everyone watching. So I built this mountain for you to climb, Ayesha confessed, tears now streaming down her face, mixing with the sweat. I became the monster you needed to slay. I became the tyrant you needed to overthrow. Every opponent I broke, every promo I cut, every single act of cruelty, it was to forge you in the hottest fire imaginable. Because this division doesn't need a queen who rules with fear. It needs a leader who rules with heart and skill. It needs a true, unbreakable diamond. The shock was seismic. It was a revelation that recontextualized Ayesha's entire historic reign. She wasn't a villain. She was the ultimate mentor, playing the part of a monster to create her own perfect successor. Her reign of terror was an act of sacrifice. My back is gone, Tessa, Ayesha admitted, her voice dropping to a whisper. This is my last match. I can't kick out of another magnum. I can barely stand. But I am not giving you this championship. You have to take it. You have to finish the story. Show them all why you are the one. Earn it. Ayesha threw the microphone down and tore off the brace on her knee, tossing it aside. She spread her arms wide, a look of grim satisfaction on her face. She was exposed, vulnerable, and ready. The coronation, a legacy forged in respect. Tessa Blanchard was speechless. Her entire motivation, her righteous anger, the black and white narrative of good versus evil, it had all evaporated. She looked at Ayesha, no longer seeing a tyrant, but a warrior who had sacrificed her own body to elevate the entire sport and to push her to a level she never knew she could reach. Tears welled in Tessa's eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of profound, overwhelming respect. She shook her head. She wouldn't just pin this legend. She would give her the warrior's end she deserved. She wiped her eyes, her expression hardening into one of pure focus. She walked over to Ayesha and helped her to her feet. For a moment, they stood forehead to forehead in the center of the ring, a silent understanding passing between them that was more powerful than any words. The crowd, now fully understanding the gravity of the moment, rose to its feet in a thunderous ovation. They re-engaged. It wasn't a fight anymore. It was a ceremony. They traded stiff forearm blows, a final exchange of respect. Ayesha, running on fumes and pure will, attempted one last lariat. Tessa ducked under it, hooked Ayesha's arms, and lifted the bigger woman onto her shoulders with a surge of adrenaline she didn't know she had. She held her there for a second, a tribute to the fallen queen, before hitting a devastating final move. Not her finisher, but a move from her father's arsenal, a gourd buster, as a nod to the legacy Ayesha had challenged her to define on her own terms. Tessa Blanchard covered Ayesha Raymond. The referee, with tears in his own eyes, made the count. 1. 2, 3. The bell rang, and the arena exploded in a cathartic wave of emotion. Tessa Blanchard was the new WCW Women's World Champion. But she didn't celebrate. She rolled off Ayesha and lay on her back, staring at the lights, processing the weight of the moment, the title, and the truth. Ayesha, with the help of the referee, slowly got to her feet. She took the championship belt, walked over to the new champion, and knelt down. She helped Tessa to her feet and, in the ultimate passing of the torch, wrapped the championship belt around Tessa's waist herself. She raised Tessa's arm in the air as confetti rained down from the ceiling. Ayesha Raymond's reign as the Amazon was over, but her legacy as the secret architect of the future was just beginning. And Tessa Blanchard stood tall, no longer just a diamond forged by pressure, but the crown jewel of a new era. Her reign beginning not with a victory over a villain, but with an honor bestowed by a hero in disguise. The night was called Glam, but the ending was something far more real, raw, and beautiful than mere spectacle. It was legendary,